Chapter 9. Repression of Abuses and Infractions. Article 49. The high contracting parties undertake to enact any legislation necessary to provide effective penal sanctions for persons committing or ordering to be committed any of the grave breaches of the present convention defined in the following article. Each contracting party shall be under obligation to search for persons alleged to have committed or to have ordered to be committed such grave breaches, and shall bring such persons, regardless of their nationality, before its own courts. It may also, if it prefers, in accordance with the provisions of its own legislation, hand such persons over for trial to another high contracting party concerned. That means if our courts are too corrupt to deal with these people, we can just hand them over to somebody who can. Please take note. Hand such persons over for a trial to another high contracting party concerned, provided such high contracting party has made out a prima facie case. Hoping I'm pronouncing that right. Each high contracting party shall take measures necessary for the suppression of all acts contrary to the provisions of the present convention, other than the grave breaches defined in the following article. In all circumstances, the accused persons shall benefit by safeguards of a proper trial and defense, which shall not be less favorable than those provided by Article 105, and those following the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of prisoners of war, August 12, 1949. Article 50. Grave breaches to which the preceding article relates shall be those involving any of the following acts if committed against persons or property protected by the Convention: willful killing, torture, or inhumane treatment, including biological experiments, willfully causing great suffering or serious injury to the body, health, and extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. Article 51. No high contracting power shall be allowed to absolve itself or any other high contracting party of any liability incurred by itself or by another high contracting party in the respect of breaches referred to in the preceding article. Article 52. At the request of a party to the conflict, an inquiry shall be instituted in a manner to be decided between the interested parties concerning any alleged violation of the Convention. If agreements had not been reached concerning the procedure for the inquiry, the parties should agree on the choice of an umpire who will decide upon the procedure to be followed. Once the violation has been established, the parties to the conflict shall put an end to it and shall repress it with the least possible delay. Article 53. The use by individual societies, firms, or companies, either public or private, other than those entitled thereto under the present convention, of the emblem or the designated Red Cross or Geneva Cross or any sign or designation constituting an imitation thereof, whatever the object of such use, and irrespective of the date of its adoption, shall be prohibited at all times, by reason of the tribute paid to Switzerland by the adoption of the reversed federal colors and the confusion which may arise between the arms of Switzerland and the distinctive emblem of the Convention. The use by private individual societies or firms of the arms of the Swiss Confederation or marks constituting the imitation thereof, whether as trademarks or commercial marks or part of such marks for a purpose contrary to commercial honesty or in circumstances capable of wounding Swiss national sentiment, shall be prohibited at all times. Nevertheless, such high contracting parties as were not party to the Geneva Convention of July 27, 1929, may grant to prior users of the emblems, designated signs, or marks designated in the first paragraph a time limit not to exceed 3 years from the coming into force of the present convention to discontinue such use, provided that the said use shall not be such as would appear in time of war to confer the protection of the convention. The prohibition laid down in the first paragraph of the present article shall also apply without effect on any rights acquired through prior use to the emblems and marks mentioned in the second paragraph of Article 38. Article 54. The high contracting parties shall, if their legislation is not already adequate, take measures necessary for the prevention and repression at all times of the abuses referred to under Article 53. Final provisions. Article 55. The present Geneva Convention is established in English and in French. Both texts are equally authentic. The Swiss Federal Council shall arrange for official translations of the convention to be made in the Russian and Spanish languages. Article 57. The present convention, which bears the date of this day, is open to signature until February 12, 1950, in the name of the powers represented at the conference, which opened at Geneva on April 21st, 1949. Furthermore, by powers not represented at that conference, but which are parties to the Geneva Conventions of 1864, 1906, or 1929, for the relief of the wounded and sick in armies in the field. Article 57. The present Geneva Convention shall be ratified as soon as possible, and the ratification shall be deposed at Berne, Berne, deposited. The present convention shall be ratified as soon as possible, and the ratification shall be deposited at, I'm thinking it's Berne, but I'm not sure how to pronounce that. A record shall be drawn up of the deposit of each instrument of ratification, and certified copies of this record shall be transmitted by the Swiss Federal Council to all the powers in whose name the convention has been signed or whose accession has been notified. Article 58. The present convention shall come into force 6 months after not less than 2 instruments of the ratification have been deposited. Thereafter it shall come into force for each high contracting party 6 months after the deposit of the instrument of ratification. Article 59. The present convention replaces the convention of August 12, 1864 and July 6, 1906 and July 27, 1929 in relations between the high contracting parties. Article 60. From the date of its coming into force, it shall be open to any power whose name is not present, from the date of its coming into force, it shall be open to any power in whose name the present Geneva Convention or the present convention has not been signed, to accede to this convention. Article 61. Accessions shall be notified in writing to the Swiss Federal Council and shall take effect 6 months after the date on which they are received. The Swiss Federal Council shall communicate the accessions to all powers in whose name the convention has been signed or whose accession has been notified. Article 26. The situations provided for in Articles 2 and 3 shall give immediate effect to the ratifications deposited and accessions notified by the parties to the conflict before or after the beginning of hostilities or occupation. The Swiss Federal Council shall communicate by the quickest method any ratification accessions received from parties to the conflict. Article 63. Each of the high contracting parties shall be at liberty to denounce the present convention. The denunciation shall be notified in writing to the Swiss Federal Council, which shall transmit it to the governments of all the high contracting party. The denunciation shall take effect 1 year after the notification thereof has been made to the Swiss Federal Council. However, a denunciation of which notification has been made at a time when the denunciated power is involved in a conflict shall not take effect until peace has been concluded, and until after operations connected with the release and reparations of the persons protected by the present convention have been terminated. Which means you can't just back out of the Geneva Convention in the middle of the conflict. If you're taking notes, you should be. The denunciation shall have effect only in the respect of the denunciating power. It shall in no way impair the obligations which the parties to the conflict shall remain bound to fulfill by virtue of the principles of laws of nations, as they result from the usages established among civilized peoples, from the laws of humanity, and the dictates of the public conscience. Article 64. The Swiss Federal Council shall register the present convention with the Secretariat of the United Nations. The Swiss Federal Council shall also inform the Secretariat of the United Nations of all ratifications, accessions, and denunciations received by it with respect to the present convention, in witness whereof the undersigned having deposited their respective full powers, have signed the present convention, done at Geneva this 12th day of August, 1949, in the English and French languages. The original shall be deposited in the archives of the Swiss Confederation. The Swiss Federal Council shall transmit certified copies thereof to each of the signatories and acceding states.